in our clean tech breakfast series program, and I have the pleasure of hosting Eavor, a super transformational, amazing Calgary-based company focused on geothermal power, and they're not just traditional plain vanilla geothermal. And so I'm super excited to have them tell us what they're doing and how they're transforming the world of creating decentralized energy. This morning, we have our partners on the show with us as well. National Bank, Christina Lopez is the Managing Director of Investment Banking, and Alicia Couto, who's a Venture Manager for Innovate Calgary in their energy and clean tech practice. So without further ado, I will get Christina kindly to introduce Paul, and then subsequently Alicia can introduce Shyamli. By the way, sorry, Paul Cairns is their Chief Business Development Officer at Eavor, and Shyamli is their CFO, is also joining us and talking about, going to be giving us a perspective on how do you, round up the resources to launch heavy CapEx projects. So take it away, Christina.
Thanks, Clay. So as mentioned, my name is Christina Lopez. I'm remiss to not give a bit of a commercial as an investment banker, because then I wouldn't be doing my job properly. So I am a managing director in the investment banking team, as mentioned, at National Bank Financial, with a focus on the clean tech sector. National Bank itself is proud to partner with Intergen on its Clean Tech Breakfast Club series, and the second installment of that series today. The series combines two core focuses for the bank: the drive to support entrepreneurs through various levels of growth, as well as our goal to aid companies that are helping decarbonize industries. So with that, obviously, we've got Eavor Technologies today. Eavor is, if not my favorite, one of my favorite clean tech companies in Canada, and should be on everyone's radar screen. It is one of the most exciting clean tech companies, not just for our country, but globally. It's been named as part of one of its many accolades, a global clean tech, on the Global Clean Tech 100 list, which showcases the top 100 clean tech companies in the world. The company is pioneering an innovative closed-loop geothermal technology, which was mentioned earlier, that allows it to deliver truly scalable, clean power and heat around the world. The company is raised, and I think this is an important aspect, is always capital raising is very difficult for these early stage enterprises who do have large commercial projects in the pipeline. They've successfully raised $225 million of equity to date from an impressive roster of investors that include BP Ventures, BDC, Temasek, Vickers Ventures, among many others. In addition to that, Eavor was awarded an incredible grant of 91.6 million euro from the European Union Innovation Fund to help develop its first commercial scale project at Gerets Ried in Germany, and I'm sure that we'll get into that more today. So we're lucky enough to have two members of the team here, of the executive team, with us. I'll be introducing Paul Cairns. Paul is the Chief Business Development Officer, and alongside the CEO, John Redfern, is a co-founder of Eavor. Paul is a key part of the company's success to date, and part of the fundraising success they have. He's been able to draw on his experience as an investment banker, and as well as his passion to incubate and develop new ventures. He's a passionate entrepreneur, skilled capital raiser, and an incredible storyteller. He's a proud Calgarian and is based out of our great city. So with that, I'll pass it over to Alicia to introduce Shyamli.
Thanks, Christina. Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Couto, and I'm the Venture Manager of Energy and Clean Tech here at Innovate Calgary. I'm also part of the team that works out of the Energy Transition Center, which is located in the Ampersand building in downtown Calgary as well. The Energy Transition Center is a partnership between the University of Calgary, Innovate Calgary, and Avatar Innovations. And the center is purposely designed to ideate and seed startups for generating energy transition and advanced energy system solutions, upscaling highly qualified professionals, and developing next level skills in technology development, scale up commercialization, and catalyzing the regional innovation community at large. And so today I do have the pleasure of introducing Shyamli Mohamed, who is the CFO of Eavor Technologies. With more than 15 years of global international leadership in finance and operations management with public companies to drive growth and strategic partnerships across functional leaders to effectively bridge the gap between operational decisions and financial targets. So with that, we'll hand it over to the Eavor team to showcase their presentation today. Thanks.
Thank you, Alicia and Christina. I just want to give a quick shout out to our team here, Sandy Gilbert, our CEO, Tony Ignacio, our marketing lead, Kyle Beckermert, venture manager, and Emily Hillman, who's our community lead. So to kick it off, Paul, how was Ever born? You and I met actually in the Mop Squad Cafe just 10 feet from me in 2017, 18, when you were just getting started with Ever. What was the driver? Where did the IP come from? How did you guys have the gumption to put this thing together in a city that's, very fossil fuel focused?
Okay, well, thanks. And before I answer that question, let me first say thank you to all the organizers of this event. And I've watched it before and had some very interesting groups on in the past and whatever, but I appreciate the opportunity for Ever to continue to be able to spread the story of how we started and what we're doing. So again, thanks to everyone who's been involved in organizing this and inviting us to be a part of it today. The beginning of Ever is well, I think an interesting story. I hope others will agree. It comes from a lens, a little bit of very much of a lens of finance, or sometimes problem in finance for actually oil and gas companies, which may be surprising, but won't be shortly. So at one point, about 7 years ago, for those in Alberta and maybe others, you may be familiar with a pretty sizable problem in the province, and it's not just Alberta; it's lots of places around the world of suspended inactive wells from oil and gas that are no longer active or no longer prolific or what have you. And oil and gas companies, have this obligation to once they're done using the location, is to clean it up and put it back to kind of the way it was, or back to agricultural lands, whatever the case might be. And en masse, you see this is not really happening to the level maybe that people expected it to happen. And rather than look at it as a problem that oil and gas companies should step up and deal with it and take responsibility, myself and John Redfern, we tried to decide, could there be a way that rather than having these things sit on oil and gas companies or any company's balance sheet on the liability side, something that was overhanging them, restricting them to be able to raise capital and so on and so forth. Could there be a way that not just removed from the balance sheet, removed from the liability side, but transferred over to the asset side? A simple way of saying that is, could the sites be used, or could the wellbores be used in a new fashion and in a new way, to make them assets again, not something that needed to be cleaned up, but something that can continue to be used. Quickly, geothermal came to the forefront as a potential to do that, and now the story goes pretty fast. So we looked at some of the ways that had long been thought of to be able to utilize the existing wellbores at these locations. Nothing inventive and nothing new. And in the beginning, how could they be repurposed? And we dug into it and quickly found, like we now know, many others before us found, repurposing of those wellbores, in particular in Alberta, just wouldn't have it wouldn't really have a real opportunity in Alberta, at least not to take a huge bite out of the problem that was existing there. However, we did think of a different way of approaching it that it also turned out lots of people had thought of before. But as recently as maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the technology to do what we do just didn't exist. And what we do, drilling from 2 separate locations and then connecting underground, that was not possible 10, 15 years ago. But the advancements in drilling, primarily in the heavy oil industry in Alberta, that have come into play into the oil sands and SAGD drilling in particular, have developed a lot in the last 15, 20 years. So I think you could say that in a way, John and I got a little lucky. No one had looked at solving the problem the way we had recently. People had looked at solving the problem or doing geothermal the way we had before, but the technology was nowhere near. We came in at a time when the technology had advanced a lot, and John and I did our best to calculate what the opportunity could be, and it looked pretty darn good. And now the end of the story, and then I'll pass on to other questions. we reached out in our networks in the Alberta area to geoscientists, engineers, drilling sorts, and two of our founders, Matt Tays and Janine Vanny, are some of those people that we reached out to, and we asked them a simple question. What we had calculated and what we had put together, had we done it right? And did they agree that there was the opportunity there from a technical side? Well, they were doing that analysis. John and I were out measuring the size of the market and maybe where this could go. A little bit more of the business acumen that maybe John and I had. And then when we returned back as a group to meet, I quite famously remember it. Matt in particular said to John and I, it's like you two have no technical abilities whatsoever. You've totally screwed this up. You guys missed it big time. It is way better than you realize. So at that moment, with some of the changes that Matt put in that had IP potential and had the opportunity for intellectual property and patents and so on, we formally began to move forward as a team in a group to develop the technology and deploy it in a business plan that we'll get into the discussions of that later. That is the foundations of the company, looking to solve suspended inactive well problems and how they're not being properly abandoned, turning them from liabilities into assets. And we found a way through our networks, but expanding well beyond the boundaries of Alberta.
Very cool. Thanks, Paul. Shyamli, over to you. Tell us more about your work at Eavor and what are the key milestones over the next 12 months that you guys are looking to accomplish?
Thank you, Colin, and thank you for having me on the show. And I wanted to thank everybody for this morning attending. The work at Eavor, it's been exciting. And, like Alicia introduced me, I was in the oil and gas for a long time. So when Eavor came in focus, it was very interesting. And I just love it when the business development guy speaks assets and liabilities. My work is halfway there. So thank you, Paul. So no, it's been exciting. It's a great technology. The potential is extensive. But again, from a finance perspective, it's always about how do we scale? Where is the capital? So, maybe to put the milestone in perspective, just to think of it in 3 Ps, right? And Eavor is a clean energy company. So let's think of it: planet, people, and profit. Those are the 3 things that come to mind right away. So my job for the next 3 is, for as long as we can scale, is, as Christina mentioned, we have the EUIF grant in Germany. So we are going fast and furious to commercialize the first commercialization loop. Of course, it's all about funding. And she mentioned, when it's a startup, it's always about capital. How do you raise it? Because you haven't commercialized and everybody's waiting for people to, first commercialization, and then you have followers. So I think that's a challenge that we take it on head on. And so my first focus is, how do I sufficiently raise capital and make sure the projects are fully funded or sufficiently funded. The next milestone is, of course, building as we go. We build talent and we build a best-in-class team across the globe. And of course, if it's a global business, then the global structure needs to be in a good place so that the return to the shareholders and the shareholder value is maximized. I would say those are the 3 things, but don't forget, we have to focus on planet, we have to focus on people, and we have to focus on profit to survive and to scale.
Awesome. Thank you, Shyamli. What would you say are the key milestones that you guys are looking to accomplish from a project perspective or from a financing perspective over the next 12 months to go beyond the project in Germany?
So I can take it briefly and then I'll hand it over to Paul. So Germany, of course, is our focus. We are in the process of raising our Series B capital. That's in progress. The National Bank has been a big partner to us. And so once those are done, then of course we're looking at the world. The US is a big market for us. We have to expand, we have to scale. And given that, the word spread around, so hey, the world is our oyster after that.
Right, right. Thank you, Shyamli. Paul,
Paul?
what's the business model? So, you guys have a newer type or a different iteration of geothermal where you have a loop. Do you want to tell our audience what exactly the product is in layman's terms, and then tell us how you make money doing that?
Sure. Traditional geothermal, or what everyone usually thinks of geothermal when you're going deep in the ground, is just simply the harvesting of heat. In traditional geothermal, however, what's been done in places like Iceland and continues to be done in places like Iceland and the Ring of Fire around the world is not only does it need to be hot, there needs to be an aquifer. There needs to be a constellation of geological circumstances or characteristics in order to be able to harvest that heat from the ground. In traditional geothermal, you need to pump water down. Water needs to be able to make it through the rock, collecting heat, and then be pumped back into surface. And the key there is that the water needs to be able to make it through the rock. One thing that is certain and ubiquitous around the world is that the deeper you go into the earth, the hotter it is. And there are some places where it becomes hotter sooner, and some places where it takes longer or deeper to get hot. But without exception, as you drill into the earth, it gets hotter. Every system is a closed loop system, which means we are drilling and connecting well bores. We don't mean get close, we mean connect. So we drill vertical wells, then expand into multilateral wells, and then connect each one of those multilaterals subsurface. Now it is guaranteed that the water that we flow through this closed loop system will make it through. We're not relying on porosity and permeability within the rock for the water to continue to make its route. Well, it's making its route now, it's guaranteed route. It's doing something else that's guaranteed. It's in contact conductively with hot rock. So again, the deeper you go into the earth, the hotter it becomes. We drill our, what we call everloops, in a fashion so that the water is because of the connectivity in the closed loop, the water is guaranteed to make its route, therefore guaranteed to be touching the hot rock and collecting that heat and bringing it to surface. That is there's more to it than that, but we'll leave it there for that. We are doing something that has never been done before, and that leads into the business model. Traditional businesses, when you are doing something better than doing something the same as, but maybe perhaps improved or better or cheaper or more efficiently than others have done before, is a different business model. There are different options available to you for a business model to follow. When you're doing something that's never been done before, like we are, a lot of those options are not available to you for a traditional business model that you would follow. So I'm answering a couple questions here all at once. So building off of what are our targets from what Shyamli in part answered, to what is our business model and what is our target customers. This question will be answered in my next couple statements kind of all together. Somebody has to go first when you do something brand new. There's no way around it. Someone needs to go first. When you do things for the first time, they tend to cost a lot. What is a lot? I'll qualify it this way. A lot more than the average person is willing to pay for the result that it would get. If you take the cost of something that is done for the first time, and that is going to generate money, that's going to make money for you, the amount of money that it generates rarely compensates the investor for the capital expenditure that they need to make in the beginning. Someone needs to go first. We'll get to who's going to go first here in a second. Once someone goes first, and once some of these everloops are built, you practice, you learn. You might even improve the technology, you may discover a problem, figure out how to solve it. There could be intellectual property, more patents available to the solutions to these problems that you have discovered on your own. Put that aside for a moment. The most important thing is that as you practice, as you do go first, and the next, you get better at what you're doing. If you look in Alberta to Duvernay wells, about 15 years ago in Alberta, when some of the first Duvernay wells were drilled, same rig, same people, same everything that's done today. 15 years ago, that's a $22 to $25 million process. Today, it's $3 million. Why? Practice. Somebody went first, spent $22 million on a Duvernay well, and excuse my French, lost their ass in doing so. But they practiced and they got better and better and better. And now it's an extremely viable, high margin business. This is our business plan. We're going to go first. We're going to build the first one. We're going to lose our ass. And then we're going to come down the learning curve, bring the economics to bear so that there will be people to go second. That's the other part of what we've been doing in some of the targets that one of the ones that maybe Shyamli didn't mention. What we're also doing, well, preparing ourselves, raising the money, getting this substantial grant in Germany to build the first one in Geretsried, south of Munich in Germany, going first with some partners, amazingly, to come in and lose their ass alongside of us. We're going to go first and come down the learning curve there. But in the meantime, we're not doing that in a vacuum. What the business development group and origination group led by Robert Winslow, who is stationed in Europe, and we're not just looking in Europe, other places around the world, we're establishing some great locations for people to go second, preparing the ground so others will come in to go second. We will go first. We're preparing the ground for people to go second. And we believe after all the learnings of going first and going second with prepared ground for those folks, then the mass, the people willing to go third, are then like traditional businesses look now. People coming in with their advantages, their abilities to compete and do well and go around the world. How does that make money for us? We have a licensing technology. We are not planning on being an energy company that owns these Everloops and makes their money selling electricity or selling heat to the market. We're going to go first and help people go second. So the market opens up for everyone to go third, and we are going to charge a licensing fee. We're going to sell our technology to all those who want to go third and second and take our profit and bring that back to our investor who lost their ass now when we put it into the first projects so that they have this overall larger return to what they're in for. We explain this to our investors. People like Christina, who we're out raising our money, help explain this business plan to our investors. And in the process, we stimulate and initiate scalability. Most important thing to ever is scalability. The people going third, the massive amount of people going third. That's how we make our money for our investors today. That's also how we're going to change the world. We're not going to do it ourselves. We're going to do it with our partners, and we're going to give them financial motivation to do it.
Very, very good response, Paul. Thank you for all the details. So licensing, who do you think are your target customers? Like obvious ones right now, and then potential ones on the edges that might come around in 5 to 7 years.
Maybe I'll start with the answer and pass over to Shyamli for some details. So who the target market is the people I referred to as the people going third, but you're looking for some detail on that. So those could be people with just buckets of money. That all they are is money. They have no abilities and capability. They would be looking for services companies to go and to go and build these things. Perhaps some of them would come to Eavor. We will have our own abilities to build for people and do that. Then there's a whole bunch of groups that, traditional oil and gas companies or the services companies in and around them are a great example, not the only example, but they are a great example that are already equipped with the geoscientists, engineers, and so on and so forth to do and build an Everloop. But they need a license to do that because we own the technology. So it's the groups that are capable of it on their own and the groups that are not capable of it on their own, and they go and contract on their own people to build for them. And I think Shyamli would be good to put a little more color on that.
Yes, so who's our target customers? Exactly. The conversation today around the world is, the greener energy, the net zero, and everybody's a part of it. So customers are, of course, the traditional oil and gas service companies, producers, the very well-known names around the world. And of course, there are small operators that, have some capacity, but are partnering with other oil and gas companies. So, the typical names of the big oil companies that I don't want to name, but everybody knows about it, but we're not stopping there. If there is a customer that's already, in the business and wants to do their own well, their own loop, that's the construction part of it, we will definitely license the technology. And the technology is a pretty mobile product that we have, and that can be structured very efficiently. So it brings a big value proposition for us. as a technology company.
Thanks, Shyamli. What's the play in Germany? Is it a municipality, or how did that consortium come together to partner up on this first commercial Everloop?
Yeah, so of course, the first commercial loop, which is happening in Garrett's Reed, is being partnered with the local municipalities who are looking to buy the electricity and the heat generations. So we do have some contracts in place with them. And this is why Garrett's Reed's got the most focus, because that's the first loop that will generate, that will prove the technology, that would give us the predictability of the heat generation and the power conversion. So this is a contract with the municipalities and the utility companies around the proximity. And Paul, if you want to add some more for Garrett's Reed.
Yeah, I just add, I think what might be some very interesting color for people to know. The Garrett's Reed location, the exact location, the exact well pad, we have expanded the well pads, but the exact location, the same well pad was tried for traditional geothermal about 10 years ago. What went wrong? What went wrong is what goes wrong a lot of the time with traditional geothermal. It was hot, because remember, it's guaranteed to be hot, but there was not adequate subterranean conditions for the water to flow from an injection well to a production well. It didn't work. There's another way of saying this in the oil and gas world, it kind of mixing in the oil and gas world. It was hot, but it was dry. With an Everloop technology, there is no such thing as a dry hole. We are drilling for a target that we cannot miss. So on an exact location where traditional geothermal failed, there was actually quite a bit of a setup, right? There was a license, there was a drill pad, there was an area set aside for well, in their case, one drilling rig to work. We need 2 drilling rigs simultaneously drilling. But anyway, there was an understanding, there was a community waiting and hoping for heat or electricity. Everything was lined up as they are before you go and drill. All what we're going to do when we're successful, all that part of it was lined up. The problem is it was a dry well for them. That is a tremendous head start for Eavor to come in. Again, our technology cannot miss. So we come in to a location in Garrett's Reed that has a little bit of a head start. This place south of Munich. It has a little bit of a head start for us. So there's a reason to go there, but there's lots of places that are like that. There was another set of, call it market constellations or market factors that made that a good place to go. But most importantly for us, actually wasn't the head start, is that it's a tremendous showpiece. There's a lot of things about doing it in that spot in Germany that will draw the eye of not just other places in Germany, but a lot of places in Europe. We call our project Eavor Europe for that reason. Think of it as a show home, right? So we're going to go in there, go first. It's not just that we're going to learn. It's not just that we had a nice head start to go there, is that it will draw the eye of many people to look and go, wow, if they were able to do that there, what do we have back here domestically in another part of Europe or another part of the world for that matter, that same technology would work? If it's a target they can't miss and it's hot everywhere, I guess that means it works here at home for us. And that's exactly the point. I think the European Innovation Fund saw this as well. Grant money doesn't just go out to make a project profitable or to make a project economic enough for the other partners to come in. It's done that for our location here at Eavor Europe. But the reason the granting agencies do that is so that they feel as though it will at least push you down the learning curve enough so that the technology will flourish and scale, which is of course one of our goals around. So the world, and certainly a good part of Europe, is looking to see how we will go first here. I assure you, they're not looking for our economic outcome. They're looking for the learning curve that will come down if we do it possible, and then apply that kind of forward thinking to what the economics could be back to where they're going to go.
Yeah, just
Great,
for
thanks.
clarity, I think when Paul mentioned, the geothermal well that was traditionally geothermal that was not working, and we're going to work on that same well, just for clarity, because that's what I learned in my short time with Eavor. So we've got lots of oil and gas companies that have dead wells, which is an oil well, and they want us to drill in that well to produce geothermal, and it doesn't work. So just want to make sure.
Yes, That's good clarity. The fact that there's a wellbore there is meaningless to us. It's the site, it's the location, and the known hot rock that's beneath it. The wellbore that they drilled before, we're not using that. We're not re-entering that in any way. It's not valuable to us. The site and the head start and its location and its ability to be a showpiece for the rest of Europe and other parts of the world. That's what matters to us.
Very, very good. That's awesome. So, there's lots, I mean, obviously geothermal is considered renewable power, clean, much cleaner. But you've got competing investments in solar and SMR and hydrogen. And so when you guys are going out and shopping your technology and trying to get ahead of everybody else that's trying to, bid projects for renewable with limited capital available in the market to do projects and generate power, what are the winning conditions that make Eavor beat out the, not just the geothermal competition, but everybody else that's vying for the same capital budget?
Sure, and I think I'll share a screen with something here. And as I do that, I'll say one of the main things is the difference between baseload or firm or always on power and heat compared to intermittent. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that here. I think it's a well understood concept. Solar panels and wind don't do very well at night or when the wind's not blowing. And I understand that there's an idea that batteries can bridge some of that gap, and that's all fine. Nothing, including wind and solar with batteries, will ever truly come close to what first world nations have experienced their whole lives, what baseload power looks like. But that's okay, because as you can see on the chart, when you try to make equivalent, when you try to make wind and solar equivalent to let's call it coal or gas or hydrocarbon-based power, there's other problems and other advantages of wind and solar, and we all know what those are. Wind and solar does not have, or has very little, as you can see on this chart, CO2 emissions. And that is a trade-off with having baseload reliable power. And some of that trade-off can be bridged with batteries. That's good. And it really is, it is great. And there's nothing wrong with wind and solar. And in many ways, there's nothing wrong with coal-fired or maybe even coal-fired power, given that you need it in the world. But there are disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is CO2 or emissions release. And you can see with wind and solar, as we all know, you don't have that. But also, please note on this chart, you also don't have that with Eavor. And again, with Eavor, you do have baseload power. You do have firm, reliable, 24/7, always on power, without the CO2 emissions that you get from coal and natural gas. That's an obvious advantage. I won't talk anything more about it because there's something that a lot of people are realizing or seeing now, and you see it more and more in the media, is there's another cost, or there's another drawback that people have to remember, and that is in the manufacturing and construction and the technology put into building solar panels and wind turbines. The rare earth minerals, the steel, the copper, the elements and the things that require mining is a much larger footprint in that regard than coal and natural gas. But again, with Eavor, you have the best of both worlds. We have the materials intensity that's very similar to coal and natural gas. We again have the reliability, the always on ability that you get with coal and natural gas. But we also have the low emissions that you get with wind and solar. We truly do have the best of the best of it all. And then the last kind of political tilt that I would put into this, there's another slide to show on land use, and we'll get to that maybe in a minute. The other political tilt is that energy independence and energy security. Here in Alberta, where we're from, and I think a lot of people on the call are from, it's rarely energy independence and energy security is rarely thought about as an issue because we have it. Okay, there's lots of places around the world highlighted it's not just the Ukraine or Eastern Europe or Europe itself highlighted by the war and conflict in Ukraine. It's been highlighted by that. There's lots of places around the world that have energy independence issues that maybe they're not experiencing a pinch or crunch on that now, but they could in the future, and they worry about it. We don't worry about that in Alberta or in Texas or in a lot of places in North America. That tends not to be worried about. There's lots of places around the world, that do worry about such things. On the left-hand side, coal and natural gas, obviously you need a source of, let's just stick to natural gas for the European example. You need a source of natural gas if you're going to burn natural gas to make electricity. What if you have a conflict with someone like, just randomly picking a nation like Russia, and they're not going to maybe send the gas, or they're going to charge you too much, or so on and so forth. You don't have energy independence, and you feel it then. So the solution may seem like, go get wind and solar. It's not Russia's wind, it's not Russia's sunshine, it's ours. So we'll harvest it and collect it. But to build the wind and solar equipment and gear that you need and the technology that you use, you have to get that from somewhere. And who controls the majority of the technology, majority of the mines and materials that go into wind and solar? It's China. What you are doing is transferring your dependence on a petrostate to an electrostate. With an Everloop, that's the point of this chart. With an Everloop, you don't have that either. It's the heat beneath your feet. It's your domestic potential energy security, and you can harvest it and put it together with the same materials that are used for building coal plants, gas plants, and building drilling rigs. Russia, China cannot prevent you from doing that. You have energy security completely with an Everloop. That's I hope that highlights a really big advantage for what we have. Maybe some questions on that, or Shyamli, if you wanted to add anything, and then I'll go on to another point.
Yeah, I think I will add to this, just to bring it from a perspective, what Paul covered is the emissions, the requirement on metals, and everything has some contribution, but bringing it together, just think of the world we were in, right? We had the pandemic, we had the supply chain disruption, we've got the 40-year inflation, we've got the banks failing, we've got the interest rates hiring, man, I can just go on and on, right? So, and then thinking of supply chain, China is a big contributor. How do we manage all this? How do we get independence on this? The geopolitical tensions are so high. When you put all of that comparing to what we're doing, and we're the very first ones, so just trying to get people to put their mind together and think through, yes, the emissions are there, plus all the economic conditions that we live in today, and how do we bring that together? Does that make sense? That's the purpose-driven mindset we have to bring. And of course, the world is looking at us, and this is where it's tough to go first, but then you're not a leader if you're not the first person. So and that's where that takes courage, and that's where Eavor is. So just to bring it together to everyday's life that we live in, and how does this play into?
Great, thanks, Shyamli. Paul, this is probably a good segue to go into slide 6 and talk about your environmental efficiency and how much energy you generate per hectare of land relative to the other forms of renewable power.
Yes, thank you. And I'll think I can be a little quicker on this one because the slide and the illustrations I think really speaks for itself. Again, I really am not trying to say anything negative about wind and solar. They're wonderful technologies. They just have their limitations, and sometimes there's existential things like I talked about the reliance on electrostates for the mining materials and so on. That's not wind and solar's fault. That just happens to be a reality in the world. And as Shyamli addressed it with another example of supply chains and things of that nature. Anyway, there's another footprint. That is probably the first thing you think of in footprint is how much land is being occupied and used up and not being able to be used for other items, for other things. That's probably the first footprint people think of. There's lots of kind of the CO2 footprints and things of that nature, but what I'm talking about here is kind of the first footprint that you think of, the land that you're using on surface. So an Everloop is drilled into the ground and uses a massive amount of land, a massive amount of space. 4, 5, 6, 7 kilometers subsurface. I don't know of anybody who's trying to utilize that space for something else. And just before anybody asks, could you still have an oil and gas well producing from that formation, that same area where we're harvesting heat directly? Yes, absolutely. We wouldn't interfere with that anyway, and it wouldn't interfere with us in any way. So no problems with scenarios like that, but we're not, I guess, here to talk about oil and gas. The land use required for wind, as is illustrated on here, is in the neighborhood of 300 times more than the land use for the equivalent amount of baseload heat or baseload electricity. This will all be electricity, excuse me. The equivalent amount of electricity, you need 300 times the land footprint for wind, and 30 times the land footprint for solar. That is significant. Again, maybe not so significant in Alberta or Texas or places around the world that don't have a lot of space. This is the first thing that we talk about when we go and meet with somebody new in the Netherlands or Germany or Singapore. They don't want to hear about any of the other stuff until we get through this. Doesn't matter what your solution is. If you don't have space for it, how does it matter? It's irrelevant. Doesn't matter if you're dependent on China for the materials. If you don't have space for it, who cares? So many places around the world, certainly not southern or central Alberta, are very, very worried about the space use. It's not like we're reckless here in Alberta or other places about land use, but energy density. We have one of the highest. I believe nuclear may be the only thing that has a higher energy density. But then it gets into how much of an offset around that nuclear power plant are you talking about, right? Sometimes you put a nuclear power plant too close to population. It isn't just the footprint that the power plant sits on, it's the offset around it that maybe becomes unuseful for other things. But putting that aside, we have one of the highest energy densities, and that's what this illustration puts together. This is a door opener. This is a must-have for the majority of the places that Eavor goes and talks and talks to. In addition, last point, when you're making heat, when you're using heat, you cannot put heat 100 kilometers away from where you need the heat. You need to put, if you're using an Eavor loop for heating, you need to put it right at the heat source. So now think in a city, look at the picture. You can't have this land use in the middle of a population. There's no space for it. An Eavor loop can be snuck in a little tiny bit of land space. Think of it the size of a football field. You can put that about anywhere you want, and create as much power as if you had what you see in the picture for wind or solar. We can move on unless there's questions.
Yeah, that's very compelling. We'll go to questions in 3 or 4 minutes here. I'm sure there's lots of props in the chat around everyone being very excited and very thrilled about what you guys are doing. So we'll get some questions in the latter part of the show. But just quickly, do you have a slide on your ESG offsets? Since this is a clean tech series, do you have any ESG offsets or you can speak to or you can show? Forecast it. I know you haven't done a project yet, but forecast it.
No, I don't have a slide prepared.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe it was somewhat covered in the previous slide with the bar charts. Our emissions, I think they call it, scale 3 or I forget the terminology for it, but go ahead, Christina.
Right, scope 3 emissions.
Our scope 3 emissions would be similar. I don't want to say better necessarily without having the data to qualify it, but similar to what you would see with solar and wind.
Okay, very good, very good. So we're going to get into the Q&A quickly here, but Paul and Shyamli, Intergen's all about connecting experienced advisors with growing companies, and that's been a real driver for growing companies in terms of the mentorship and the support they get from a wider community beyond their internal team. Who have you guys surrounded yourself with from a mentorship advising perspective that's been critical to the growth of Eavor and bring it to where it is today?
All right, so Paul, we do have the advisory group and I'm very new to it, so I'm going to hand that over to Paul. But just before I hand off, I would say, you know, our advisory group has been extremely honest and, you know, with the purpose of the ESG, as you mentioned, environment is of course our first, sustainability and scalability, of course, and then governance of it. But they are very fiercely competitive. They do put stretch goals on us, which is excellent for us. And, you know, they are pushing us to get an excellent, talented team. So we are agile, we are adaptive, and we are resilient. So with that, I will let Paul help provide some lights on who is our advisory team.
Sure. So some of the names, somewhat. I think that some of these people are pretty famous. Maybe others agree. Michael Liebrecht is probably the largest or most recognizable name that chairs our advisory committee. Jesse Jenkins is another that connects with the university, the Department of Energy in the United States. He's a special advisor to the White House in the United States, and is also a member of our team. There are others, but we have selected, and some of them have selected us advisors to you know, who are specialized in certain areas, if that would be finance or even technical development and so on. So we have a good group of advisors. You can see them and their bios on our website. And as important as the advisors is the construction of the team. It's been a while since I personally have been adding directly new members of the team, and now the team is kind of building itself. I hope this doesn't come off as arrogance, but you know, when you're changing the world, when you have what we feel is a responsibility to do this, it's A players only here. I guess with the exception of myself. We made a little rule. We made a little rule early on that you had to hire people better than you. And so that was pretty easy for John and I in the first couple of rounds, and it's getting harder and harder and harder for each layer of the management and the company to continue to hire better than themselves. But we believe this technology deserves that treatment. So we have an incredible team. They are not just experts in their field or expert generalists in and around. We have some rules here at Eavor that all subscribe to. Nobody quits, nobody points fingers, and no one gets left behind. This group protects each other, supports each other. I don't know how else to put the analogy. 1 + 1 is 3, and Eavor 1 + 1 is 33.
Wow, awesome.
We work together in that regard.
Very good, Paul. Okay, so we got lots of questions, and I'm going to ask the people posting in the chat. Thank you very much. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? We'll start with Juan Munoz. Was a question about how much water you're using.
Perfect. And I was actually hoping that question would be brought up first, because I had the slide all ready to go. This connects in with the ESG comment and so on and so forth. I think this chart can pretty much speak for itself. You can see traditional geothermal, hydrothermal on the left. I don't know if people can do the measurement and so on and so forth, how much water that is. It's actually quite a bit. There's a new technology that's trying to get going out there in geothermal. It is basically traditional geothermal, but when the conditions aren't just so down in the formation, they frack, like in oil and gas. They do a frack to try to create the porosity and permeability. Fracturing uses water, and you can see the impact of it there. Everloop is a closed loop system. We fill the Everloop with water. It just circulates within the system. There's no gains or no losses. There might be a little bit of leak off over time. I mean, maybe the equivalent to your garden hose at home running unattended for maybe 10 minutes, okay? I'm not trying to say there's no leakage. I'm not trying to hide from anything like that. This is the stats. This is the way it is. Our closed loop system does not use up water. Does not use up water. Other it uses water. It doesn't use up water. other geothermal systems use up water. And this is the proportion that you can see on the screen. I hope that answers the question. I know we're out of time, so we're a little short on time, so I'll stop there.
Great, Paul. Thank you. That's very succinct. We've got 5 minutes left. Dave Murray, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, will do. Just had to find my mute button. Real quickly, I think it's awesome that what your platform is. I understand why you're looking at opportunities in Europe and Asia because of the land use opportunities. But I'm wondering, I mean, you've got a great technology. Canada has a mission to get to net zero. What do you need from Alberta or from the Canadian governments to advance implementation here in either Alberta or Canada? And I guess the flip side is that what barriers are you running into for domestic investment?
A little bit of a complicated answer, but I'll try to be succinct.
Figured.
We would really rather not rely on government grants to make project by project economic and therefore financeable by others. We're happy to have a grant like the one we have from the European Innovation Fund that is lined up to help us go first, but is not supposed to be needed when people go second and third. Too often in this world, grants are doled out all the way through, first, second, third, and beyond. That I think would misrepresent Eavor's intentions to come down the learning curve. We intend to come down the learning curve, so we don't need grants. We'll take a grant early when we're going first. So yes, the Canadian government could help and has helped with that. We have received grants from the Canadian government, from SDTC and NRCan. We've also received grants from Alberta Innovates and ERA in Alberta. The size of those grants is nowhere near what's happening in Europe, and that's fine. It was earlier in our production level, and it's helped us get to where we go. It is our sincere hope that we do not need to continue to go to Joe taxpayer for grants in the future. When we're going first, when we're demonstrating, we're happy and probably do need them. And the Canadian government and the provincial government of Alberta has done this for us, and we hope and probably they will in the future. As far as I think reading into your question, Barry, I'm sorry, I forget the name. Reading into your question, it might have been more like, why start in Germany and why not start in Alberta? There is some conditions, market conditions here that are unavoidable. First of all, Alberta would be a far less expensive place to build these Everloops. The drilling, the Canadian dollar, the drilling equipment that's here, and so on and so forth, it would be half the cost, almost half the cost, I would say, certainly in Alberta than in, say, places like Germany or Japan or whatever. Half the cost. Seems like we should be here for sure. The heat gradient here in Alberta is average. It's not low, it's average. We'd like a place to, when you first get going, a little bit of extra help, kind of, Mother Nature's grant would be would be that it's a little bit hotter, a little bit sooner. Don't have to drill as deep, or you get more energy when you drill as equally deep, or so on and so forth. I'll let you know though that Germany, in this location that we're going in Germany, is just kind of almost like Alberta, about the same temperature. We like that part of it because it's more of a, well, if it can work in Germany, then it could work other places where it's hotter. The main difference is the market price. The price of electricity, the price of heat in Alberta is about the lowest there is in the world. So to compete with natural gas, coal fire, there's still coal fire in Alberta, to compete domestically with the low price of energy. I know it doesn't feel that low to all of us sometimes, but relatively it is substantially lower. How much lower? 6 to 15 times less expensive. So Germany, the price of heat, the price of electricity is, and unfortunately, is even above this number. But normally, without the conflict in Ukraine, the price of these sort of things can be somewhere between 8 and 10 times the revenue of an Everloop project that costs twice as much to build is 8 to 10 times more. The clear and obvious place for us to start, where we were the least handicapped, was places like Germany. And despite Alberta probably being the cheapest, least expensive place to build this and to practice and learn, it would require grants beyond what Eavor would feel comfortable asking for in order to make that work, for going first and maybe even for going second. Alberta and North America and Canada is a big part of us going third.
Awesome. We have a few more questions from Carrie and Brock, but we're out of time, unfortunately. So, Paul, if you want to pop your email into, if you don't mind, pop your email into the chat session there, and they can follow up with you directly.
Sure.
Yeah, they're great questions, but unfortunately, Brock and Carrie don't have the time. But anyways, thank you all very, very much for joining. We've had a great attendance, great questions, and an amazing two people from Eavor and our host. Before we end the show, I'd like to again thank Christina from National Bank and Alicia from Innovate Calgary for being our sponsors for the Clean Tech Breakfast Club series. As well as can't not recognize our long-term major funders, the top 7 over 70, RBC Foundation, Synovus, Sandstone Asset Management, Prairies Can, and the Calgary Economic Development. So our next show is coming up in late June, so feel free to join us again, and see you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.